If Naomi wasn't rich, none of us would even know her name. Priya said it like it was nothing, like it was just a fact sitting between them, obvious and unremarkable. And Dana laughed, that easy, champagne-loose laugh, and said, honestly, would we even follow her back? More laughter. She got me into the Harlow group dinner, Becca said. My studio lease sorted in a week. All I had to do was stay in her circle. That's the thing about Naomi, Priya said. She's so desperate to keep people around her that she just gives. You could take everything from that woman, and she'd thank you for the company. It's actually kind of tragic, Dana said. It's useful, Priya said. There's a difference. Naomi stood just around the corner from the balcony, champagne still in her hand, her own party still roaring behind her. 300 people inside celebrating her name. And here were the 3 women she called her closest friends, dividing her up like a buffet. She stood there until the laughter faded. Then she walked back into the party, smiled at everyone who looked her way, made a toast, posed for photographs, and thanked the caterer on her way out. She sat in her car for 11 minutes before she could drive. Welcome to Afro-Seoul Stories, Soulmates. Please like, share, and subscribe. Naomi Cole had built Lumiere Beauty from nothing. 26 years old, and she had done what most people twice her age were still dreaming about. A luxury skincare brand that had taken Los Angeles by storm, then the rest of the country, then international press. Her face had been on the cover of 3 magazines this year alone. Tonight was supposed to be the celebration of all of it. The decision didn't happen dramatically. It wasn't one big moment where she sat down and made a plan. It happened quietly, the way most important things in Naomi's life happened. She drove home that night and sat in her penthouse and looked at the view of the city she had worked herself to the bone for and felt absolutely nothing. She called her mother, who was in London, and got voicemail. She called her father, who was in Dubai, and he picked up for 4 minutes before telling her he had a dinner to get to. She sat on her cream sofa surrounded by things that had cost more than most people's yearly salary and thought, this is it. This is the life. And I feel completely alone in it. She gave herself 2 weeks to wrap things up quietly, told her executive team she was working remotely for a while, moved her most important meetings to video calls. And then she found a neighborhood on the east side of Los Angeles, the kind with actual trees and small restaurants, and people who walked their dogs in the morning, and she signed a lease on a small apartment above a vacant commercial space. Paid cash. Used her middle name on the lease. And then she did something that surprised even herself. She opened a coffee shop, not because she knew anything about running one, but she had always loved the idea of a place like that, somewhere warm and lived in, where people came and stayed a while. She spent 3 weeks painting the walls herself, pale sage green with warm wood shelving, plants everywhere, mismatched chairs, soft lighting. She called it Moss and Morning, and she went by Nia. Nobody knew. That was the point. The cafe opened on a Tuesday in March, and 12 people came in that first day. By Friday, it was 20. By the end of the first month, it had become a quiet neighborhood staple. People came for the coffee and stayed because of Nia behind the counter, who always remembered how you took your drink and always asked how your day was going and actually waited for the answer. Naomi had not felt this light in years. That was when Kim Sung-ho walked in. He came in on a Thursday afternoon in April, camera bag over one shoulder, a light jacket despite the warmth outside. He looked around the space the way photographers look at things, not casually, but with quiet attention, taking in the light coming through the windows, the shadows the hanging plants threw across the wooden tables. He came to the counter and looked at the menu board for a long moment. What do you actually like here? He asked. Not what's good, not what's popular. What do you actually like? Naomi looked at him. He had calm eyes and an unhurried manner, the kind of person who had no interest in performing for anyone. The oat latte, she said, and the cardamom scone. Though I'm biased because I make the scones myself. Then I'll have both, he said simply. He sat by the window and worked on his laptop, occasionally looking up to watch the street outside. He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't seem to need to. He finished, left a generous tip, and walked out. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the second week, he was coming every morning. By the third week, Naomi was making his order before he reached the counter. He always sat by the window. He always tipped well. He always said thank you like he meant it. They started talking properly around the 4th week. It happened the way things do when 2 people are in the same space often enough and neither of them is pretending. You work long hours, he said one evening. He was the last customer, and she was wiping down the counter. I like it here, she said. Even at closing time, especially at closing time. It's quiet. The place feels different when it's empty. He looked around slowly. You designed this yourself? Mostly. It shows. There's intention in it. Every corner has something worth looking at. He paused. That's harder to do than people think. Naomi looked at him. Are you a photographer or an interior designer? Photographer, he said. But the eye is the same. She laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd had in weeks, the kind that surprised her. He smiled like he knew it. Kim Sung-ho, he said, extending his hand across the counter. Nia, she said, shaking it. He nodded once. Didn't ask for a last name. Didn't push. Just accepted what she offered and let it be enough. He started helping her close some evenings. It started accidentally. He was still there at closing time one night when her part-time girl called in sick, and without being asked, he began stacking chairs. She didn't tell him to stop. After that, it became a comfortable pattern. He'd stay, they'd put the place to rights together, and then they'd sit on the counter with leftover pastries and talk. Really talk. Why photography? She asked him one night. Because people are the most honest when they don't know they're being watched, he said. When someone's not performing for a camera, when they're just existing, that's when they're most themselves. I like catching that. That sounds like it takes a lot of patience. It does. He glanced at her. What about you? Why a coffee shop? Naomi was quiet for a moment. I needed somewhere to be a person, she said finally. Not a role, just a person. Sung-ho didn't ask her what she meant. He just nodded slowly, like it made complete sense, like he understood the weight of what she'd said without needing the full explanation. That was the thing about him. He never pushed. He just made space. He started bringing her food around week 5. He would come in with a container from the Korean restaurant 2 streets over, warm soup, rice, banchan, and set it on the counter without ceremony. You forget to eat, he said the first time. I've watched you skip lunch 4 days in a row. You've been counting? I notice things. It's occupational. I eat, she said. Pastry crumbs don't count. He nudged the container toward her. Eat. I'll have my usual. She ate. It was the best food she'd had in weeks, partly because it was genuinely good and partly because someone had thought about her. Not about what she could do for them, just about whether she had eaten. The phone call happened on a Friday morning in May. Naomi was in the back prepping for the day when her phone rang. Priya's voice came through warm and curious, like nothing had happened, like the balcony didn't exist. Nia? Oh wait, sorry Naomi. A little laugh. God, I heard about the coffee shop thing. Is it true? Are you actually working there? Good morning, Priya. I'm not judging. I had to hear it from Dana. Why didn't you tell anyone? I didn't realize I had to. We're your friends, Naomi. Naomi said nothing. So what is this, like a passion project? Because obviously you don't need. It's a business I'm running. Right. But Priya lowered her voice the way she did when she was about to say something she knew was unkind. You built a whole luxury empire just to serve coffee? How long before you get bored of this little experiment? It's not an experiment. Naomi. And I'm working. So I have to go. She hung up, stood in the back of the cafe with her phone in her hand, and breathed through the tightness in her throat. She walked out front and opened the doors. Sung-ho arrived at his usual time. He came in, looked at her once, and paused. Rough morning, he said. I'm fine. You're wiping the counter you already wiped. And you made my coffee wrong. You know I don't take sugar. Naomi looked down at the cup. Sugar. She never did that. Sorry, she said, pouring it out. He came and sat on the stool closest to her. Not invasive. Just near. You don't have to tell me. But you also don't have to pretend everything's fine. She set his cup down. Someone called this morning. An old friend. Said some things that reminded me why I left. Left where? She met his eyes. My old life. He wrapped his hands around the cup. Do you miss it? No, she said. Then, more quietly, I miss what I thought it was. Sung-ho looked at her for a long moment. That's an honest answer. I'm trying to be more honest, she said. He smiled then, small and real, and it changed his whole face. It suits you. That was the moment she realized she was in trouble. Not the dangerous kind. The other kind. The kind where someone has gotten past all your walls without either of you noticing. The envelope appeared on a Wednesday. She found it propped against the espresso machine when she came in to open. Her name, Nia, on the front in clean, even handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. It was her, taken in the cafe, through the window, the light catching the side of her face while she was laughing at something a customer had said. She hadn't known it was being taken. She looked like herself. Not the CEO, not the magazine cover. Just a woman laughing in a warm room, completely unguarded. Beneath the photograph was a note. I've been trying to find the right way to say this for 3 weeks. I'd like to take you somewhere. Not the cafe. Somewhere outside of this. This Saturday, 7 o'clock. If you want to. Sung-ho. P.S. I took this the first week you let me stay late to help close. I kept it because I think this is what you actually look like when you're not watching yourself. Naomi read it twice. Then she sat on a stool and held the photograph for a long time. She texted him 3 words. Saturday. 7. Yes. He took her to a night market in Echo Park. Not a restaurant with a reservation. String lights and food stalls and the smell of different cuisines mixing in the warm evening air, a live band playing something soft in the background. I wasn't sure, he admitted as they walked in. You might have wanted somewhere fancier. I love this, she said immediately. They walked through slowly, stopping to taste things, arguing gently about which vendor had the best tteokbokki. He had his camera with him, but took 0 photographs, as if he had made a deliberate decision that tonight he was just going to exist. You're not shooting anything, she said. I'm off tonight. Do you actually turn that off? The noticing? Not really, but I can choose what to do with it. They ate standing at a wooden table, street food spread between them, and she told him about growing up between Los Angeles and London, always feeling slightly between places. He told her about growing up in Koreatown with his mother and younger sister, how tight that apartment had been and how much he had loved it anyway. Your dad? She asked. Not in the picture. Long time. No bitterness. My mom is enough. More than enough, honestly. What's she like? He smiled. Loud. Warm. She feeds everyone who comes to the house, even if she's just met them. She'll probably try to feed you the first time you meet her. Naomi felt warmth bloom in her chest at the casual certainty of the first time you meet her. He walked her home. They stood outside her building, and he looked at her the way he sometimes looked at his photographs, like he was taking something in properly before he had to let it go. I had a good time tonight, she said. Me too. He held her gaze. I'd like to do it again. Okay. Soon. Okay, she said again, smiling. He didn't kiss her that night. He squeezed her hand once, briefly, and walked away. And Naomi stood outside her building holding a small succulent he'd bought from a vendor who was packing up, watching him go, understanding that whatever this was, she wanted more of it. More dates followed. He took her to a bookshop in Silver Lake where you could spend 3 hours and still feel like you hadn't seen everything. They developed a game where they picked books for each other based entirely on cover art. She picked him a dense black and gold hardcover about architectural theory. He picked her a slim pastel novel about a woman who moved to an island and learned to fish. This is an insult, she told him, delighted. It's accurate, he said. They went to a convenience store one night after late closing, just for ice cream. And somehow that became a 2-hour wandering conversation about what they were afraid of, what they were working toward, the distance between the life you imagined and the one you actually lived. What does success look like to you? She asked, somewhere on a quiet residential street. This, he said simply, a midnight walk with ice cream, a life where I'm doing work I love and spending time with people I actually like. He paused. People like you. She looked straight ahead so he wouldn't see her face. He introduced her to his family on a Sunday. She wore a simple linen dress and brought a tin of cardamom scones. His mother opened the door, looked Naomi up and down with warm, bright eyes, and said, Oh, you're lovely. Come in, come in. Are you hungry? I made too much food. Sung-ho's sister Jeon was 20 and studying design and asked Naomi approximately 40 questions over lunch, half about the cafe and half about her skincare routine. Mrs. Kim kept refilling her bowl without asking and told 3 separate embarrassing stories about Sung-ho's childhood that he bore with remarkable patience. Naomi sat in that small, warm apartment with its bookshelves and family photographs and the smell of doenjang jjigae and felt something crack open gently in her chest. This was what a home felt like, not a designed space, a place where people actually lived and belonged to each other. On the walk home, she was very quiet. You okay? Sung-ho asked. Your family is wonderful, she said. Her voice came out a little tight. They liked you. My mom said the scones were the best thing she'd ever eaten. She's being kind. My mom doesn't say things she doesn't mean. It's her defining quality. He looked at her sideways. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I've been surrounded by people my whole life, she said slowly. And I've never felt anything like what I felt in that apartment. Sung-ho stopped walking. She stopped too. Late afternoon light filtered through the branches above them, and he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Then stay in it, he said quietly. You're welcome there. They already decided. Just like that. Just like that. He hesitated. I already decided too. A while ago, actually. She held his gaze. Her heart was doing something complicated. Nia. He took a breath. I know we've been whatever this is, but I'd like it to be something real. Something official. I'm not interested in casual. He paused. I like you. I like who you are at closing time when you've had a long day and you're still making terrible puns. I like how seriously you take other people's feelings. I want to be your person. If you want that. Sung-ho. You don't have to say it perfectly. You just have to say yes or no. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had asked what she actually liked. Who had counted the days she forgot to eat. Who had taken a photograph of her laughing without her knowing because he thought it was the truest version of her. Yes, she said. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Then he stepped forward and kissed her, gentle and certain, his hand cupping her face like she was something worth being careful with. She closed her eyes and kissed him back and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That was the 1st of June. For weeks, Naomi was happy in a way that felt clean and uncomplicated. Sung-ho at his window table every morning, his hand on her lower back when he came behind the counter, the shorthand that develops between two people paying close attention to each other. She had not told him who she was. She knew she needed to. She had rehearsed versions of the conversation a dozen times. But every time she started to assemble the words, something stopped her. Fear that the moment he knew, the thing between them would shift. That he would start seeing Naomi Cole instead of Nia. She told herself she would tell him soon. This weekend. Next week. When the moment was right. The moment was taken from her on a Tuesday. She was behind the counter when the door opened and the atmosphere changed. The way it does when people walk in expecting a room to accommodate them. Priya first. Then Dana. Then Becca. All three of them mid-Tuesday, dressed in casual expensive, looking around with the particular expression of people trying to find something charming and failing. Oh my God, Priya said. This is actually adorable. She said adorable the way people say it when they mean small. Naomi set down what she was holding. Priya. Surprise. Priya spread her arms. We were in the neighborhood. Thought why not stop in. She looked around again. It's really cute, Naomi. Very quaint. It's Nia here, Naomi said evenly. Right, your little alias. So fun. Priya leaned on the counter. Can we get some drinks? Dana drifted toward the back, looking at everything with a vague smile. Becca was on her phone. Neither of them noticed the man by the window who had gone very still. Naomi made their drinks. Calm on the outside. Inside, calculating how quickly she could get them out before. Does he know? Priya asked, glancing toward the window table. Her voice light and deliberate. You're a photographer. Does he know he's dating Naomi Cole? Or does he think you're just Nia the barista? The cafe went quiet. Then Becca said to Sung-ho, pleasantly, across the room, you should probably leave. This is really more of a private conversation. Naomi turned. Sung-ho was already standing, camera bag over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. He looked at her. She looked at him. And she watched the moment it all landed on his face. Sung-ho, she started. I'll talk to you later, he said quietly. And he walked out. The door swung shut. Naomi turned back to her friends. Get out, she said. Priya blinked. Naomi. Out of my cafe. We just came to. I know why you came. Naomi set down what she was holding and looked at all three of them. Calm. Completely calm. You heard I'd opened something small, and you needed to see it. Needed to confirm that it was beneath you so you could feel better about the fact that I stopped returning your calls. Dana shifted. Becca looked at her phone. I've been thinking about something Priya said, Naomi continued. At my party. On the balcony. She looked at Priya directly. You said I was so desperate to keep people around me that I just give. That you could take everything from me, and I'd thank you for the company. Priya opened her mouth. The worst part, Naomi said, is that you weren't wrong. I did that. For years. I made myself easy to use because I thought if I was useful enough, people would stay. She shook her head slowly. But I've been tired for a long time. Longer than that party. Longer than any of you probably noticed. Because you weren't paying attention. That's not fair, Dana said. We love you. You love what I do for you. That's not the same thing, and somewhere underneath all of this, you know that. Flat and final. I'm not doing this anymore. Not the favors. Not the access. Not the friendship that only moves in one direction. She picked up a cloth and turned back to the counter. Please don't come back here. Priya searched her face for the version of Naomi that would soften, that would smooth it over, that would make everyone comfortable again. She didn't find her. They left. Becca first, without a word. Dana with her jaw tight. Priya last, one hand on the door, looking back once. Naomi held her gaze until she turned away. The door swung shut. The bell above it chimed once, small and clear. Gus at the corner table said, "Good for you, Nia," into his coffee cup. Naomi laughed, short and wet. She pressed her fingers to her eyes and held herself together by about 3 threads. Then she walked to the door and flipped the sign to closed. She had a more important thing to deal with now. She closed the cafe for 2 weeks. Put a small sign on the door. Closed for renovation. We'll be back soon. Told her part-time girl to take 2 weeks off with full pay. And then she went home and sat with the silence. Day 3. Day 5. Day 8. Nothing from Sung-ho. No call. No text. Just silence, which was somehow louder than anything he could have said. She didn't blame him. She kept his photograph on her desk. The one from the envelope. The one of her laughing without knowing she was being seen. She looked at it every morning and thought about how carefully he had held that image of her, how he had kept it because he thought it was the truest version of her. And she had repaid that by letting him find out the truth from Priya's mouth in front of a room full of people. She didn't blame him at all. She was managing, still taking her Lumiere calls, making decisions, moving through the days. But the apartment felt very quiet and the days felt very long, and she kept looking at the photograph he had taken of her, framed now, on her desk, and thinking about what he had said the night he asked her to be his girlfriend. You just have to say yes or no. Day 14. Her phone lit up. One message. Just 4 words. Are you okay? She stared at it for a long time. Her eyes burned. She typed back 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Then she put her phone in her pocket, picked up her keys, and drove to his street. She sat outside for 10 minutes. His lights were on. Her hands on the steering wheel were steady, but her chest was not. She got out before she could talk herself back into it. She hadn't even reached the bottom step when the front door opened. He must have seen her from the window. He stood in the doorway in a plain gray shirt, barefoot, looking at her with an expression that was careful and open and completely unguarded. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She pressed her lips together. "I should have called. It's okay. It's not okay. I've been ignoring you for 2 weeks. Come inside," he said simply. The apartment was warm, books stacked everywhere, a camera on the coffee table, a half-eaten bowl of rice on the kitchen counter. It smelled like sesame oil and the faint woody scent she associated with him. And just walking through the door felt like putting down something very heavy. He gestured to the sofa. She sat. He sat across from her, not next to her, giving her space, and waited. "I should have told you," she said. "I know that. I knew it every day, and I kept finding reasons not to, and that wasn't fair to you." She looked at her hands. "My name is Naomi Cole. I started a skincare company 6 years ago, and it became more than I expected. I have a team and investors, and my face has been in magazines, and I have a penthouse I barely spend time in. And I'm telling you all of this because you deserve to know, and because I'm sorry you had to find out the way you did." Sung-ho said nothing. He was listening the way he always listened. Completely. "I opened the cafe because I overheard my closest friends talking about me like I was a resource," she continued. "Not a person, a resource. And I realized I had no idea who actually liked me for me. I wanted somewhere I could exist without that." She swallowed. "And then you walked in. And you never asked me for anything. And I was so afraid that if you knew the truth, you would start looking at me differently. That you would see Naomi Cole, and not just Nia." She finally looked up. "I didn't want to lose this. I know that's not a good enough excuse." Sung-ho leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When Priya said your name, I want you to know what I was actually thinking." He paused. "I wasn't angry. I was thinking about how exhausted you must have been, carrying all of that, and still showing up every morning to be present for people." He held her gaze. "And I was thinking that I wished you had trusted me with it. Not because I had a right to know, but because you clearly needed someone to know." Naomi felt her eyes sting. "I'm not with you because of what you have," he said. "You knew that before you knew it. That's why you trusted me enough to keep coming back to those closing conversations. Some part of you already knew I wasn't like them. I know, she whispered. Then why were you afraid? Because the people who were supposed to love me regardless had conditions, she said. And I had learned to assume everyone did. Sung-ho was quiet. Then he moved from the chair and sat beside her on the sofa. Not touching, just closer. I don't have conditions, he said. I want the woman who makes cardamom scones at 6 in the morning and stays too late because she loves it. I want the woman who built a beauty company from nothing because she believed in herself. I want all of it. The cafe and the CEO and the person underneath both of those. He looked at her. You don't have to be smaller to be loved. Not by me. She turned to look at him, and her face was doing things she couldn't fully control. Eyes wet. The whole weight of 2 weeks and 2 years, and a long time before that sitting right at the surface. I'm sorry I disappeared, she said. Stop apologizing. Are you here now? Yes. Then that's enough. He reached over and wiped the tear that had escaped with his thumb, careful and unhurried. She let him. She closed her eyes and leaned into his hand for just a second, and something in her chest that had been rigid and braced for a very long time quietly let go. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her. She leaned in and kissed him, done being afraid, and he kissed her back with the same steady certainty he brought to everything, one hand at the back of her neck, warm and present. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. Don't close the cafe again, he said. She laughed, a real one, and everything broke clean. Moss and Morning reopened 3 weeks later. The back wall had been repainted, deep terracotta, and Sung-ho had mounted a small framed print on it. The first photograph he had ever taken of her, black and white, a woman laughing behind a counter, completely unaware she was being seen. Naomi stood in front of it on the morning of the reopening and felt him come to stand beside her. You put it on the wall, she said. You told me you liked it. In my apartment. I didn't say put it in the cafe. Your apartment doesn't have enough foot traffic. He looked at it. More people should see what you look like when you're actually happy. She looked at the photograph for a long moment. That woman with her head tilted back, eyes bright, completely at home. She hadn't known she could look like that. Sung-ho, she said. I love you. She hadn't planned to say it. It just arrived, the way true things do. She looked at him, and he was looking at her with an expression that was soft and unsurprised, like he had known before she did. I know, he said. I love you too. Have for a while. Since when? Since the night you told me you needed somewhere to just be a person. He looked at the photograph, then back at her. I thought, who is she, that she built something like this just to find some peace? I wanted to know. He paused. Now I know, and I'm not going anywhere. The cafe filled that morning. Gus, the retired teacher, came in first and nodded at her like she had done something that mattered. Sung-ho sat at his window table and ordered as usual, which she made without being asked, and the morning moved the way good mornings move, with warmth and small conversations and nothing performing itself for anyone. She was wiping down the counter mid-morning when she noticed him standing at it. No coffee cup, no camera, just standing, hands in his jacket pockets, with the stillness that meant he had something to say. Sung-ho, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He took one hand out of his pocket. He was holding something small. A ring. Simple, understated, a thin gold band with a small stone that caught the morning light. She went absolutely still. I know it's early, he said. You could very reasonably tell me I'm moving too fast. But I'm a person who notices things. He set the ring carefully on the counter between them. And I've noticed that you are the most real thing I've ever been around. I've noticed that I sleep better on the nights we talked late. I've noticed that my mother has set a place for you at her table without being asked for the last 2 months. He looked at her steadily. And I've noticed that every time I imagine my life moving forward, you're in it. Not as someone who's just there. As someone who makes it make sense. Naomi looked at the ring. Then at him. I'm not asking you to disappear into my life, he said. I'm asking you to build something with me. The cafe and the company and the messy real thing in between. He took a breath. Will you marry me? The cafe had gone quiet. Gus was watching with his coffee held in both hands. The couple in the corner had stopped working. Her part-time girl had appeared from the back with both hands pressed over her mouth. Naomi looked at Sung-ho, the man who had asked what she actually liked when they'd just met, who had counted the days she forgot to eat, who had left an envelope by the espresso machine because he didn't know how else to start. who had opened his door when she showed up after 2 weeks of silence, and said come inside without making her earn it. She picked up the ring. Yes, she said. He exhaled and smiled, and she saw in his face every version of him she had come to know. The quiet morning regular, the man at the counter with food she hadn't asked for, the person who said you don't have to be smaller to be loved, all of it at once. He came around the counter and put the ring on her finger and kissed her once, properly, in front of Gus and the couple in the corner and her part-time girl who was now definitely crying. When they pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to his and laughed. You proposed in the café, she said. This is where you're most you, he said simply. It made sense. She looked at the room around her. The sage walls and the warm wood and the hanging plants and the terracotta back wall with the photograph of a woman laughing without knowing she was seen. She looked at the man in front of her with his steady eyes and his unhurried love and his ring on her finger. She had left a glittering room full of people who saw a balance sheet and found, in a quiet cafe in a neighborhood with trees, someone who had simply looked at her and wanted to know. That was everything. And that, soulmates, is what it looks like when someone finally chooses you the way you deserve to be chosen. Not for what you have, not for what you can give, just for you. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story. We'll see you in the next one.